all of that, I had an amazing conversation with a gentleman this week who has cracked the code on how to earn cash back from renting his apartment. And I thought, mind blown, because you guys hear me preach the benefit of ownership all the time. Good market, bad market, high rates, low rates. I can almost always find an example that shows it made sense for somebody to own property during that time period. So in this conversation, I was super intrigued, and I've got to say, I really admire the creativity. This young man convinced his landlord to let him pay his rent with his cashback card, and I believe it was a Discover card, but he's getting 5% cash back. So we were talking, and I said, you know, how much is your rent? Well, it's $3,000 a month. So he's paying $36,000 a year on his cashback card. And that's the only thing he uses the card for, which is quite brilliant because he's got an amazing credit score. Ironically, he's considering buying. So we were just looking at the pros and cons of both. But every once in a while, he'll get a better offer on a cashback credit card and he'll start paying with that. So he's really done a good job to try to maximize some kind of return on rent. So $3,000 a month and currently getting 5% cash back. So he's getting $1,800 a year in cash back just for paying his rent. Kudos for him, because very, very few people are that creative, and he's getting something back where most people are getting absolutely nothing other than the, you know, opportunity to live in that apartment. So anyway, we're talking about him possibly buying a property. So I was fascinated by what he's accomplished with this strategy. So he's been renting for about 10 years and not always at $3,000. It's increased consistently and significantly over time. But if you figure 5% at $3,000 for 10 years, that's about that's about $18,000 in cash back from renting an apartment, which is amazing to me because that's almost half a year, or it is half a year in free rent. So phenomenal job in doing that. But then we looked at ownership. And where he's looking for that money, he could buy a $350,000 property at today's interest rates with an FHA loan and have a payment of, give or take, taxes and insurance. It might vary for where you are based on taxes and insurance, but around $3,000 a month. So I wanted to be super conservative in this analogy because I knew as soon as I talked to him, I was going to share this with everybody on the air. Let's use a anemic 3% appreciation rate. And guys, I pulled all the data I could find this week, and it looks like historically, depending on whether it's Realtor.com, Case-Shiller, whether it's the St. Louis Fed, all of the data sets vary slightly, but it looks like we've averaged about 5% appreciation historically. So let's chop that down to 3 to be conservative. So if you bought a property today at today's interest rates with an FHA loan, a $350,000 property, in 10 years, he would have paid down $53,000 in principal. So right off the bat, if properties never appreciate, he's created $53,000 in equity wealth. Now, remember, $18,000 is what he created with this rent hack, which is brilliant, but far less than $53,000. Now, the cool thing is, over that 10-year period, that fixed rate mortgage payment didn't change. Yes, maybe taxes and insurance varied, but the meaty part of that mortgage payment stayed the same, where you know in 10 years your rent is going to be more. We're not even factoring any of that into this analogy. So $53,000 in wealth creation just by reducing principal. Now, if we apply that very anemic 3% appreciation cycle, or if we apply that very anemic 3% appreciation rate over that 10-year period, that property is now worth $470,000. An additional $120,000 in equity wealth, this time by the property appreciating at 3% annual appreciation rate. So $173,000 in wealth creation versus $18,000 in cash back. And needless to say, he was super excited to dig in and start looking for a property.